doo 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 doo. Okay. I wanted to go ahead. Excuse me here while I look up something on my phone. Great way to start a video, right? I wanted to go ahead and respond to a lot of these PS5 videos here. And how am I not able to do this? Trying to look up the comments on this YouTube video on a different device, and I hate this bull crap. You don't. How are you supposed to? Oh, gosh. Oh, okay, I see it. Okay. I got it now. Forgive that little bad start to the video. So the PS5 is out now. The specs are out, and we know it's weaker than the Xbox One X, but we're starting to, I've seen a lot of FUD, and predictably enough, I'm seeing a lot of FUD and a lot of people trying to make a lot of excuses and damage control the PS5, that it's weaker, and I wanted to take on a few of those because they're funny to me. There's hordes of Sony fanboys on the internet that live for competing with Xbox, bashing Xbox. So you see so much of this. Now, I'm not saying I've seen like a ton of it. I have seen a ton of it. I'm not saying it's like overwhelming, but it is pretty bad already, and it's pretty funny to me. Now, one of the biggest things was I saw a video by NX Gamer, and he talks about the PS5 specs. And he basically cast it all as, you guys aren't understanding. See, I've said this in my last video. The only spec that the PS5 is better than the Series X in is SSD speed. So, if you're a PlayStation fanboy and you want to play up your system, what are you going to act as the greatest thing since sliced bread? Excuse me for a second. SSD speed. SSD speed is now the greatest thing since sliced bread, isn't it, though? And, conversely, here's a funny thing. Teraflops don't matter anymore. You're hearing a lot of that junk. They sure mattered a lot when the PS4 had more, didn't they? Nobody was out there saying this little... I noticed they're spreading this a lot on Reset Era. They had some developer on Twitter, and he came out and he said, I've never used the term teraflops. As a developer, I don't care about teraflops. I care about how easy the development software is to use, and I care about this, that. I've never used it. Well, you're an idiot, dude, because, funny, last generation, the PlayStation 4 had 1.8 teraflops. The Xbox One had 1.3 teraflops to start out. How'd that work out? It worked out with the PlayStation 4. Ran a lot of games better, had higher resolution, better graphics on virtually every multi-platform port. Remember that little thing about how Call of Duty was 1080p on PlayStation 4 and 720p on Xbox One, and how the Xbox One took mountains of crap on forums and Twitter and everywhere else for it? Well, maybe you don't remember that, dude, but I sure do. So it kind of seems to me like, teraflops do matter. And they're the ubiquitous measurement for a reason, Especially when you're talking about the same architecture. Teraflops are not just used in consoles. They're used in graphics cards as well, but there's some merit to the whole teraflops don't matter argument there because they're different architectures. You can't directly compare them necessarily. But these PS5 and Xbox One X are the same damn architecture. They're identical except for certain. So you can compare the teraflops directly. And they're very, very important. There's a reason why all the Sony fanboys... where was this guy back when the Sony fanboys were on forums everywhere going, the PS5 is going to be 13 teraflops, an insider told me, blah, blah. They always wanted the teraflops to be higher than the Xbox One, or Xbox Series X. if teraflops don't matter, why were they doing that? And where were you, Mr. Developer? Where were you on these forums telling people, hey, it doesn't matter if the PlayStation 5 has 13 teraflops. Teraflops don't matter. Oh, that's right. You weren't around back then, conveniently, but you sure are around now. But anyway, so let's get to this NX Gamer video. I wanted to refute it point by point. And he actually kind of makes the case, a bunch of BS. He's a known PlayStation fanboy. I've known that for years. He's one of these technical analysis guys like Digital Foundry. But he basically makes the case in his video in a sneaky way that basically the PS5 is not inferior, it's just designed different. That they went, here's another thing you're going to hear a lot of that's BS. You're going to hear that the PS5 is narrow and fast and the Xbox One is wider and slower. Well, that's not true, because it's true, but the Xbox One has a more powerful GPU, period, you know. It's not like it's just a case of, oh, we went this way and you went that way and it's the same. No, it's a case of you went this way, your way is inferior. That's the narrow and fast way. It's inferior. Narrow and fast would be fine if you ended up with more teraflops, but you didn't, you know. You ended up with nominally 10.3 on the PS5 and 12.1 on the Xbox. So, you know, like I said, this idea now that they just went about the same thing different ways. No, they didn't. One is weaker. It's called the PlayStation 5. Deal with it, you know. Yeah, so he kind of goes around, at least I do admit NX Gamer got me thinking. He basically, for example, makes the point, his whole thing is, again, I predicted this, because the PS5 only has one stat that it's markedly superior, and that stat's going to be played up in a lot of circles. A lot of people are going to be high. SSD is going to be the best things to slice bananas now, you know. Like when you build a new gaming PC, are you going to be worried about what NVIDIA graphics card you have or what Zen CPU? You know, everybody's pretty much doing AMD CPUs nowadays. What, you know, what are you going to use? The Ryzen 7 3700X? Are you going to? Oh no, your number one concern better be how fast that SSD is, right? Said no one ever, as the phrase goes, you know. But they're going to try to make it now like the SSD is the most important thing in the system. It ain't. So NX Gamer basically, and he did make me think and have a good point on this. One point he made is that I guess in Sony's presentation he mentioned that, like, for the operating system, they may not have much of the operating system loaded in. And then they will just, at 5.5 gigabytes a second read speed on the PS5 SSD, they can just load that in when it's needed really fast. You know, I guess they'll have a little bit of it in, like a half a gig, I think was his example. NX Gamer's, not Sony's. And say you need the OS and you press the OS button or whatever, then it's going to be loaded in from the SSD at a rate of 5.5 gigabytes a second at least. And bam, you know, you're going to have it in, like, it would take it at that rate, you could load in, let's say they're using the same amount for their OS as Microsoft is. So you could load in the whole 2.5 gigabyte OS in like half a second. You know, so that would allow you then to not keep the OS in memory and to keep it on the SSD and like give you some free memory. You know, but okay, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it. But there's a lot of holes in that, okay? First of all, Sony did not mention how many gigabytes the PS4 is reserving for its OS. So he just said, like, you won't have to reserve much for OS or something like that. But of course he didn't give the number. So I'm like, show me the receipts. You know, how much is that? You know, NX Gamer is just assuming it could be like half a gigabyte. But Sony didn't say that. What if it's 2.5 gigabytes just like the Xbox? Because this has been going back generations. In the PS4 generation, they said the same thing. All the fanboys on Reset Era, NeoGAF, back then, were like, you know, oh, the Xbox, it came out that the Xbox One was reserving 3 gigabytes for the operating system. And they were all like, oh, the PlayStation 4 only reserves like 500 megabytes and all this baloney. And it came out, I forgot exactly when, but it came out at some point or another by pretty trusted sources that the PlayStation 4 used 3 gigabytes for the OS, just like the Xbox. You know, Sony's not magic despite what its fanboys think. They don't. This has been going on forever where people are always trying to underestimate how little the PlayStation uses for its OS. And it looks like they're doing it again with PS5. So NX Gamer's saying, like in his example, it might be a half gigabyte. But Sony didn't say that. So like I said, show me the receipts. Show me where Sony says that they're using half gigabyte. He's not going to say that. Because it very well is probably 2.5 gigabytes just like the Xbox Series X. You know, until you show me the receipts otherwise. And then let's just keep going with this. Let's say it is that way. But why couldn't Xbox Series X do the same thing? Like, let's say both are going to use 2.5 gigabytes for their OS. So it would take the Series X like around 1 second to load that in, because they have 2.4 gigabytes a second speed. And it would take the PS5, ignoring compression and all this stuff, because I don't know how that plays into it, but just raw speed. So in the PS5, excuse me, yawn, could load the same operating system in roughly half a second. So you're talking about a half a second difference. You know, do you think people are going to riot over, oh man, my Xbox operating system takes 1 second to load in and the PS5 takes half a second? That's a half a second difference, you know? So if he's trying to say Sony could do that, then Microsoft could do the same thing with only a small difference in speed, you know? They could load their whole operating system in 1 second. PS5 could load their whole operating system in half a second. Is half a second a huge deal in life? You know, it's not. So that right there debunks NX Gamer's point. And another thing I thought about was, like, why not take it a half step? Let's say you only are going to allow half a second to load your OS in. Well, the Xbox could load 1 gigabyte of its OS roughly. These are all very rounded off figures. In half a second. So maybe they reserve 1.5 gigabytes for the OS. They load in another gigabyte when you press the button in half a second. PS5 reserves only half a gig for their OS, and they load in 2 gigabytes when you press the button in half a second. You see what I'm saying? You only saved 1 gigabyte in that example, and they both took the exact same amount of time to load their OS in. It's just the Xbox reserved 1.5 gigabyte and the PlayStation reserved half a gigabyte. And these are all just complete theoretical. I have no idea what they're actually going to do. So you see what I mean? 1 gigabyte out of 16, you know? Do the math on that. It's like 8% or something. Is it that? What is... Yeah, no, it's less than that. 16, 1/16 is what? 6%? Yeah, 6%. Around 6, probably a 6 repeating. Around like 7%, you know? Less RAM is 1 gigabyte. If the Xbox basically ended up with like 15 gigs usable, and the PS5 ended up with like 14 and a half, and the PS5 ended up with 15 and a half. If all that came to fruition, and I don't think it will, you know, my guess is neither one's gonna have a big age. So like I said, so NX Gamer acts like this is some huge deal. Oh my gosh, the PS5 could end up with a gig or 2 more RAM. You know, he didn't say that when he acted like it, but that's what it works out to. You know, even if, and I'm pretty sure Xbox wouldn't allow this to happen, even worst case scenario, you know, it wouldn't make a huge difference. You know, okay, 2 gigs out of 16. You know, at most, absolutely most, like I said, realistically it'd be more like 1 gig, because what's to stop Xbox from loading in half their OS or whatever, you know, in the same amount of speed PlayStation could load in their whole OS. I wish it would quit doing this. It doesn't seem to affect anything, but I don't like it. Anyways, yeah, so that's that. And so yeah, so and NX Gamer even went on to talk about how, you know, it's this vision from Sony, and in the he's at first he kind of hedged his bets, because at first the Xbox is going to give us better resolution and you know, blah blah blah, but later on in the generation this SSD thing is really going to, you know, help the PS5 perhaps even become the superior system or whatever, something like that. It's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. Alright, like I said, I used my PC analogy. You're building a new gaming PC. What's the first thing you're worried about? You know, you're worried about the CPU, the RAM, the graphics card. the SSD doesn't matter. Let me throw you another example, and this is the easiest way. This is the easiest way to completely shoot through NX Gamer's baloney. Let's say you had a PC with like a GT 1030, a very low end graphics card. And let's say you had a PC with a GT, but it had the fastest SSD imaginable demand in that system with a GT 1030. And then in another PC you had just a normal speed SSD, let's say, and you had a GT, and a normal amount of RAM in both these systems. Let's say they both had 16 gigs RAM, whatever. And you had a GTX 1080 or 2080 Ti, and you go to run Assassin's Creed Odyssey on them. Which one's going to run it better? Well, I'll give you 3 freaking guesses. It doesn't matter how fast the SSD is in that system with the GT 1030. The GT 1030 can't render the game fast enough. It's going to look like garbage. The SSD does not render the pixels of the game, period. Sorry, NX Gamer. Again, think of that example. It's an extreme example to illustrate the point to you. The SSD does not render pixels. No matter what you do, you can't get away from that. The fact is, GPU is a bottleneck, and it's much more powerful in the Series X. So yeah. And and NX Gamer also, he was on about, they all tried to just make it like, and there was some of this, I'll admit, when the Xbox One came out, there were people that acted like, oh, Microsoft just, they just went for different goals and they didn't mess up. But they were lying. Those people were wrong too when Microsoft messed up. Microsoft messed up with the Xbox One, and Sony messed up with the PS5. There's no use sugarcoating it. And he acted like, oh, Sony just, they went for different goals and they put their money on the SSD and this and that. No, not true. Probably more likely what they did is they didn't know what the Xbox was going to do. They thought 36 Cs would be enough, and they got caught with their pants down. That's what happened, Then I'm sure they crapped themselves when they saw the Series X reveal back in December, and they were like, uh-oh, we better do something about this. And that's where they came up with the whole boost clock nonsense, which is another thing that I have a big issue with in NX Gamer's video, because he said basically like it's going to run at 2.23 gigahertz almost all the time. Well, how do you know? You're full of crap on that one. To just assume that it runs at its highest possible speed all the time, or almost all the time, is nonsense. Nonsense. Even if Cerny said that, I'm not sure he did. I think he did. But okay, listen, he's an employee of Sony. It's his job to put the best face on things. It's his job. Are you going to take his word for it? If you do, you're stupid. He works for Sony. He wants to make it sound good. Any more than you should take a Microsoft shill's or executive's word for, oh yeah, this is all going to be hunky-dory, we're going to work all this, or whatever, anything about the hardware that they're explaining, or this is going to go like this is really great. You have to question them because they're working for Microsoft. So even if Cerny said that, I'm not sure he did, but I think he might have, that it's going to run at 2.23 most of the time. It's you can't accept that. He's a Sony employee, So that's a lie. People that prefer the PS5 are just going to pretend like it's running at 2.23 all the time. No, we don't know what it's running at. It could be running at 1.8 most of the time, I would assume it's going to run at more like 2. But that's what I mean. It's a PR gambit. What they did was they put a boost clock in there so that on a spec sheet you can look at it and it goes 10.28 teraflops. And it gets into the double digits. What they were terrified of was comparing 9 point something to 12. Because then you're talking double versus single, and that looks terrible on them. So honestly, I'm pretty sure that this whole boost clock thing, it's a PR stunt, quite possibly, if not likely. And it was probably instituted back in December when they saw that the Series X came along and the writing was on the wall that it was going to be 12 teraflops, So I think it was a last minute kludge, Like I said, all it is to get that double figures on the spec sheet. So you look at a spec sheet of the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and it doesn't look so bad for the PS5. It's not the real world. It's not going to run at 2.23. If it was going to run at 2.23 all the time, why didn't they just make it 2.23 locked? it is factually, objectively, it is going to go below 2.23 sometimes, you know? Don't, these people are going to try to mislead you and eventually have you thinking it's running at 2.23 all the time. No, it's not. That's why it's variable, you know, because it's going to go down below. We don't know how much, we don't know how far, but it's likely not going to be as rosy as a Sony employee is going to tell you. And here's another thing. The CPU is also in the PS5 variable, 3.5 gigahertz. Right off the bat, it's slower, even at its top speed, than the Series X. But they're going to play a little balancing act there. When the CPU's sucking too much power, and there's a guy on a forum I read that's really a techie guy, and he was talking about, like, you never know, like, a bunch of AVX instructions. This is way over my head, you know. So you never know, like, if a bunch of AVX instructions are going to hit you. And this is a guy who's not a fanboy. Like, I would recognize Xbox fanboys and PS. I recognize that Digital Foundry, at least the head guy, is more of an Xbox fanboy. Okay, I can see fanboys, and let me tell you, this guy is not a fanboy of any stripe. In fact, he's kind of like autistic, I think. You know, but he really knows his stuff about hardware. He's some kind of, you know, like, works in development somehow. Anyways, and he was saying, like, you never know when, like, a bunch of this is something I would never have thought of, but like when a bunch of AVX instructions or something like that might hit your CPU and all of a sudden, you know, tank your power or whatever. I don't remember how he put it, but you know what I mean? Really load down your CPU all of a sudden. Like, I would never think of something like, oh crap, a batch of AVX instructions. I barely know what an AVX instruction is. But this is like a developer guy who understands this stuff. Basically, his point was, you never know when your CPU is going to get bogged down. And when that happens on the PS5, what's going to happen is it's going to have to suck power. It only has so much budget for the whole SoC. So if the CPU is sucking more of the power budget, then the GPU has to be downclocked. You see what I'm saying? And vice versa. So it's not going to be good. It's like, okay, maybe you can get 2.23 gigahertz out of the GPU more often, but to do it, you have to run your CPU at like 3 gigahertz. So now your CPU is at a significant deficit, you know? So yeah. NX Gamer and Sony are never going to talk about stuff like that, but I'm going to let you know the truth. And I'm not saying it's going to be a disaster or anything like that. I think that the PS5 is a good machine. I like it. I like both these machines. But it is less powerful, and let's not pussyfoot around it, you know? Yeah, and this is hilarious about PS5 superior to Xbox Series X in a lot of ways. We're up to that. Granted, this looks like a Sony site, but I just found it funny. Now we're up to, you know, it took a couple days, but we've gone from it's not as bad as it seems to teraflops don't matter to blah, 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 all the way to PS5 is now superior to Xbox Series X in a lot of. Can you imagine if the PS5 had 12 and the Xbox Series X had 9 and things were, or 10 and things were reversed? Can you imagine how people would be crapping on the Series X? And, you know, and let's say even the Series X had the faster hard drive and all that. And so yeah, so those are just some points I wanted to make. Why I believe NX Gamer is wrong. Even if it is just resolution, he kind of he tries to do the old. Now everybody's doing the old. Oh, even if there's a difference, it won't matter that much. You won't be able to notice that much. There may be something to that, but again, it mattered a lot in the PS4 versus Xbox One era. It did. Anybody who says it didn't matter is full of it. It's going to matter this time too, when the Xbox Series X is running stuff faster, when it's running it at a higher resolution. You know, he says it's just going to be down to resolution. Well, what if it's just the Series X is locked at 60 FPS and the PS5 is running 52, 55, you know? There's nothing to prevent that either. He ignores that possibility, of course, because somehow frame rate is like sacrosanct. But that's funny because all the PS5, all the PlayStation exclusives happen to be 30 FPS, like The Last of Us, Uncharted, even their damn racing game of all the genres to be 30 FPS is 30 FPS, Drive Club, you know? So it's funny to me how frame rate is just, I've noticed it a lot in these comparisons between PS4 Pro and Xbox One X. There's a few cases where the PS4 Pro has actually run the game better, but at a lower resolution, a higher frame rate, lower resolution. Oh, all of a sudden frame rate is the best thing since sliced bread, and that's the mentality in the industry right now, which I find funny since so many of these PlayStation exclusives are running 30 FPS, you know? But so, like I said, NX Gamer says, oh, the only difference is going to be resolution. No. Well, in some games, there's going to be a difference of where the Xbox Series X, they're running at the same resolution, but the Series X is running it, 5 to 10 FPS faster, and at a locked 60, where the PS5 is dipping to 50, or a locked 30, where the PS5 is dipping to 25, he doesn't mention that possibility. And like I said, this is all based on if the PS5 is running at 10.3 teraflops, which I don't think it will be. I think it'll be downclocked a lot more than people think. Here's another thing I wanted to point out. There's nothing stopping Microsoft now from upclocking the Series X. It's obviously running 400 megahertz slower than the PS5. It's based on the same tech. There's no reason they can't. I don't know if they'll do this. I would if I were them. I would be heavily investigating. I don't know. It could be maybe Microsoft wants it to run really quiet. Sony's going to allow theirs to run loud. It could be a lot of different factors involved. But, if I'm Microsoft, I'm at least investigating a last minute upclock, because they did this with the Xbox One. They upclocked the GPU at the last second from like 800 to 853. Now, do I think they're going to do it? I don't know. I don't know if it's on their radar. They may be comfortable like, hey, we've got more power, so we're not going to worry about it. But if I was them, I'd be looking at kicking that GPU clock up to like 2 gigahertz, Now all of a sudden you've got 13.3 teraflops, And Sony can't do anything about it because they're already running at just bleeding edge clock speeds. So it's not like Sony can upclock back. They're already at max clock, Here's another thing. The cooling system in PS5 is going to be really expensive. This is another example that I think they screwed up, because we had an article by Bloomberg a few months ago that basically Sony was really struggling with the PS5's bill of materials. They said it was upwards of $470, I believe, and they said that for one example they gave was that the cooling system that normally costs just $1 or so is several dollars in the PS5, which may not sound like a big deal, but you have to like double everything is one rule of thumb I've heard. Every like dollar on the brick and mortar, you have to double it for retail price. So if something costs you $25 extra on the bill of materials, you've got to add $50 to the retail price. That'll give you an example. That is a lot bigger deal than it seems. The point of it all is the PS5 looks to have really expensive cooling. Now, why does it have that expensive cooling? Because they had to jack the clocks really high. Why did they do that? Because they misengineered it and they only had 36 CUs. And then when Xbox came out with a lot more power, they had to save face and jack the clock. You see what I'm saying? And so it's a evidence that they screwed it up. And here's the thing. I don't know how pricing is going to play out, so it's hard for me to say this. But it's going to look real bad for PlayStation if, let's say, they're both $499. That's a scenario I could definitely see. What if they're both $499? What if they're both the same price regardless what it is? If it's $449, I don't think either one of them is going to be able to hit $399. I don't think PS5 is the only one you might think could hit $399 because it's less powerful. But I don't think either one's going to hit $399. But I'm saying, what if they're the same price? I think that's very plausible. What if they're the same price? It's going to look real bad for PlayStation. And you know why that could be? Because, they're saving a little bit on the SoC by having only 36 CUs and a smaller chip. That's true. They're saving a little bit. But they're probably spending it back and more in that expensive cooling they're talking about. And they said they're going to do a deep dive on it eventually and whatnot. But it's going to be expensive as cooling, So, if you save $5 on the SoC because it's smaller, but then you go and spend $15 extra on the cooling solution, you misengineered your console because you're still weaker and it cost you $10 more than it would have. Now, those are just fuddy numbers. I don't have a clue what the numbers really are. But they illustrate the point that I doubt that the PS5 is any cheaper than the Xbox Series X. It's going to have, at a surface level, it's going to have a smaller SoC, saves Sony money, but it's going to have more expensive cooling, costs Sony money, and it's going to have more expensive SSD, costs Sony money. That's 2 or 3 areas which is going to cost more. That's why I believe that Bloomberg article came out, because that was after the Series X reveal, remember. So at that point, Sony knew that, damn, we got to have a low price here because we don't have as much power as the Xbox. And so they were struggling with the bill of materials. For some reason, I always want to call it something else. the bill of materials, they're struggling with it because they know they got to get this thing down to $449. Ideally maybe even $399 because they know they're less powerful. That's the problem. And they're struggling. The high dollar cooling and stuff. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. I bet now it could be that the PlayStation 5 ends up $50 cheaper. I think that's a good possibility. I don't know if I'd bet on it, but I'm positive, almost 99% positive there won't be $100 difference. There won't be a case where PS5 is $399 and Series X is $499. There's nothing that suggests that. But I could see PlayStation 5 $449, Series X $499. I can see that. Now, here's the thing though, that doesn't tell you what each one costs to produce, because Sony may be willing to go ahead and subsidize. They may say, look, we're less powerful, we need to go ahead and lose $20 per unit sold and price this thing at an attractive price point, or we're going to get behind quickly, that kind of thing. Or Microsoft could subsidize the Series X. I doubt it, that Microsoft really hasn't subsidized hardware a lot, but they could. I think this is more unlikely because it all stems from the fact Series X is more powerful. That puts Microsoft in the catbird seat. That puts them in the advantage. So I don't see Microsoft subsidizing Series X hardware because they don't need to, because people will buy it because it's more powerful. That's the clue that they were better strategically than Sony. But I could see Sony going ahead and subsidizing the PS5 to get it to a lower price. Then I could see maybe Microsoft retaliating and counter subsidizing the Series X when they didn't originally plan to. Like, let's say Sony goes really aggressive, and let's say these consoles have a bill of materials like $470. So Sony says, all right, we're going to lose some money on each console, we're going to do $450. And Microsoft was like, all right, well, we were going to do $499 on the Series X, but now we see Sony's doing $450, so let's go ahead and match it. You know what I mean? So my point is that you may not see it in the street price, and the PS5 may be $50 cheaper. It may be the same price. Those are the two most likely outcomes, in my opinion. But I think that the PS5 is not any cheaper to build than the Series X. And when you end up with a system that would be my guess. I don't work for these companies, but that would be my strong guess. So when you end up with a situation where your system is less powerful, but it has the same cost, that's the same situation the Xbox One was in. Remember that? And Xbox One was an engineering failure by Microsoft. But these things happen. The PS3 was an engineering failure by Sony. It came out a year later, and it was less powerful than the Xbox 360. How do you do that? How do you have a year's time advantage and still come out less powerful? Or they were about the same. I'll call it the same just for, simplicity's sake. How do you give the other console a year head start and you're not more powerful than them? That's a screw up. And that's what PS3 was. These company in Xbox One, I'm not sparing Microsoft. It was a screw up. They were stupid. It came out $100 more than PS4, and it wasn't as powerful. And that part of that was Kinect, but that was a screw up too. And I bet you the Xbox One bill of materials is not much, if any, lower than the PS4s. To this day, because they had ESRAM, they have a big chip in there, they have this and that. You know what I mean? And I would, for the same way, I'd be willing. So they got out engineered on that one. And now for the same token, I'm pretty sure PS5 got out-engineered on this one. And I'm pretty sure the PS5 bill of materials is not noticeably lower than the Series X is. But the performance is noticeably lower. And that's a problem. So like I said, just don't listen to all these people trying to tell you SSD is the best thing since sliced bread now. It ain't. Once again, if you go to build a fast gaming PC, are you going to prioritize a fast GPU or are you going to prioritize a fast SSD? You know what the number, and just a okay SSD, a fast GPU and an okay SSD, or are you going to prioritize a fast SSD and an okay GPU? You know which way you're going. You know which one matters. Like I said, you can have the fastest input output in the world. You can have the fastest RAM in the world. It don't mean jack if your GPU is bottlenecking you from rendering those pixels on the screen, So yeah, like I said, you're going to hear a lot of nonsense about this. But I will say, I do think, I said it in the other video, I think they're both great machines. I think that, I think they're both going to be good. I don't want to just bash one. I think the PS5, I think you could make a strong argument that it's going to be closer to the Series X than as it stands right now, than the Series X, than the one was to the PS4, you could probably make an argument that it's going to be less difference between like a 720 and 1080 and, you know, some checkerboard rendering 4K versus native 4K or whatever it ends up being. But I still think the power is very, very important no matter how you slice it, because, you know, it's underrated. It really is. You got to watch that power stuff. If it's even 5% more power, you know, like I said, if you get people on this, and you get your 12 teraflop Series X on the shelf against your 10.3, let's even give them credit for the full boost clock all the time, which I don't agree with and I don't think is reality, but let's pretend it is. Which one are you buying? Be honest. Now, and people say the games. No, the games don't matter. That's why people care. You know, they make the big deal out of these games. You know, you can go look at most sold. I've ranted about this a million times. You can go look at most sold and the PS5 4 exclusives that are hyped up and down, you know, up and down the freaking wall, millions and millions of posts that are hyped to hell and back. You go look at, they're not even in the top 10 best-selling NPD games of the year. You know, they're not even in the top 10, or if they are, maybe like one of them makes it number 8. I think Spider-Man made it like number 8 one year, but by the same token, Halo makes it in the top 10 sometimes, but towards the bottom. That's what you're at, you know. The top 10 best-selling games by NPD of the past year, there's no PlayStation exclusives. I could look it up for you right now. Dreams. But there's been a lot of hype about that, right? Oh, Dreams is so great. Just came out. It didn't make the top 20 in the last NPD sales. Not the top 20. That means it wasn't number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It didn't make the top 20. And how much hype did that game get? Like the hype every Sony exclusive gets. These exclusives don't matter. The top 10 selling games are Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Tom Clancy's this and that, Destiny, NBA 2K, FIFA, Madden. You know, those are the games that people play. The exclusives don't matter. You know, you're going to tell me that Halo Infinite isn't a good exclusive that's launching with the Series X? To me, that's 10 times more intriguing than anything Sony's got, you know? Oh, Cyberpunk, that's the game people are going to be playing on the next gen consoles, you know? I don't care how much hype Last of Us 2 gets. It's not going to sell half what Cyberpunk does, you know? Same with GTA 5. The best selling game is GTA 5, you know, year after year after year. Red Dead Redemption 2, you know? All these games dwarf whatever The Last of Us, Uncharted, anything sells. Trust me. You know, like I said, the last Sony game I can remember being in the top 10 for a calendar year was, I think, Spider-Man, whatever year that came out, and it was like number 8 or number 9. You know, that's it. Last of Us 2 will probably make it, maybe number 8 or number 9, something like that. Halo Infinite will probably make it, you know, number 8 or number 9 for its year. Well, it comes out late in the year, so I don't know. But anyways, I'm close to 40 minutes, so I guess I'll go ahead and cut off this video. But I just wanted to reply to some of the common nonsense flying around out there right now. And yeah, just don't listen to it.